Photographs. Passage 2. Mr. Lutchman takes some photographs. In this passage, Mr. Lutchman's traditional camera needs a roll of film inside it to take photographs. This roll of film has to be sent away and developed into photographs. 1. Mr. Lutchman's interest in photography came about suddenly. Wilkie, a friend at the office, had mentioned casually that he had a camera which he would like to sell. An idea caught Mr. Lutman's fancy and soon became a temptation. Look at that sunset, he exclaimed enthusiastically to his wife one evening after the idea had floated alluring in his mind for a few days. Wouldn't it be really nice to take a photograph of it? Mr. Lutzman was taken aback. Mrs. Lutzman was taken aback by the strangeness of this question, as she glanced briefly at the sky and at her husband. You need to have a camera before you do a thing like that. Photographs don't just drop down out of the sky, she said. Don't do anything foolish. 3. The following morning, Mr. Lutzman offered $20 for the camera. Wilkie laughed loudly, telling him the camera was an excellent one with flash bulbs and light meters. $20, he exclaimed. I must remember to tell the boys that one. The wires played a large and mysterious role in the Wilkie's life. He referred constantly to them. Mr. Lutzman regretted having asked him about the camera. He was afraid of what the boys would say when they heard of his offer, but it was too late now to turn back. The price is $100, said Wilkie. That camera cost me $200 and is in perfect condition. Against his better judgment, Mr. Lutzman bought the camera. 4. That evening, Mr. Lutzman turned the camera deliberately in his hands and, glancing at the instruction booklet, decided it contained only incomprehensible words and baffling drawings, and the next day he bought a large and impressively illustrated book on photography. In particular, one photograph of a sunset delighted him, and he cut it out and plastered it onto the sitting room wall, followed soon by others, all equally dramatic, of skies being ripped apart by flurries of lightning and fields of flowers bending before the wind. 5. At last, Mr. Lutzman felt ready to tackle what he described as a subject. He bought his first roll of film and drove out into the countryside. He set his roll of film away to be developed and awaited the return of his photographs with mounting excitement. Eventually, a little packet arrived, which Mr. Lutzman ripped open. The first one hasn't come out properly, he murmured. When his wife came in an hour later, Mr. Lutzman was sitting at the table, his head buried in his hands and his piled photographs scattered around him. Nobody is perfect right away, Mrs. Lutzman said consolingly. Mr. Lutchman moaned softly, moving his head from side to side in the palms of his hands. Mrs. Lutchman warmed, warmed to her theme. Maybe it was the fault of the people who developed them. I would suggest you develop your own photographs. 6. With the next roll of film, Mr. Lutchman was less ambitious, confining himself to photographs of his children on the pavement in front of the house. A group of curious neighbors had gathered to watch as Mr. Lutchman arranged the children in a line. A strained expression settled on their faces. Grin, he howled at them. Mr. Lutchman was beginning to lose his temper. The strained expressions continued. When the roll of film was finished, it was time to develop the photographs with the equipment Mr. Lutchman had now bought. Explaining that photographs needed darkness to be developed properly, Mr. Lutchman took the roll of film to a bedroom where he pulled shut the curtains. It's not dark enough, he told his wife disconsolately. Mrs. Lutchman suggested developing the photographs under the bed. She brought in the developing equipment and several saucers and basins of water as instructed. Mr. Lutchman could feel his confidence ebbing away from him as he crawled under the bed. Mrs. Lutchman handed him the items one by one, finally draping a blanket over his head. She sprawled on the floor and peeped at the huddled mass. Then, as she heard the first splash, the basins clanked against each other, followed by a steady muffled roar of anger and distress. Water began flowing across the floor. Mrs. Lutchman pulled the blanket away to reveal the drenched body of her husband. After this episode, Mr. Lutchman neglected his camera. He did make one or two passing references to it, but only when something else had gone wrong and he was feeling depressed. Section 2, Reading from Meaning. Read passage 2 in the insert and answer all the questions below. From paragraph 1, 4a. What caused Mr. Richman's sudden interest in photography? Wilkie had a camera which he wanted to sell. An idea caught Mr. Richman's fancy and soon became a temptation. What was Mr. Richman tempted to do? It was to buy Wilkie's camera to take photographs of sunset. Pick out and write down the single word used later in the paragraph which continues the idea of temptation, alluring. From paragraph 2, 5a, describe in your own words Mrs. Lutchman's reaction at her husband's question. She was surprised. Mrs. Lutchman says, don't do anything foolish. What advice do you think she is giving her husband? She is advising her husband not to buy the camera, which she believes is just waste of money. From paragraph 3, 6a. When Mr. Lustman offered a low price for the camera, Wilkie laughed loudly. What emotion do you think Wilkie wanted Mr. Lustman to feel? Wilkie wanted Mr. Lustman to feel shame and to make such a low offer for the camera. B. Wilkie laughed loudly at Mr. Lutchman, gave two other ways in which he persuaded Mr. Lutchman to pay $100 for the camera. He tells him that the camera is in excellent condition. Wilkie tell Lutchman, tells Lutchman that he would And that he would tell the boys that Lutchman has made such a poor offer for the camera. C. Pick out and write down the forward phrase from the paragraph which shows that Mr. Lutchman realized that the price of the camera was too high against his better judgment. From paragraph 4. 7a. Explain in your own words why Mr. Lutchman disliked the camera's instruction booklet. The book was difficult to understand. B. Explain fully how Mr. Lutchman's use of the large and impressively illustrated book was different from the way it was meant to be used. The book was just confusing for Mr. Lutchman. From paragraph 5. In what two ways does Mr. Lutchman try to comfort her husband over the failure of his photographs? She says that nobody is perfect in photographing. Number two, she says that the photos were not properly developed and spoiled. Paragraph 6, question 9. Give two reasons why the Lushman children had strained expressions on their faces while they were being photographed. A group of neighbors had gathered to see how the family group photo was being captured. Mr. Luchman was yelling at his children to set them for an ideal photo. From paragraph 7, question 10a, Mr. Luchman could feel his confidence ebbing away. What effect does ebbing away have, which could not be achieved by, for example, left him? Luchman was gradually losing his confidence. B. Why was the roar of anger and distress muffled? It was because Luchman had a blanket all over him. From the whole passage, 11. Choose five of the following words. For each of them, I gave one word or short phrase of no more than 7 words, which has the same meaning that the word has in the passage. Casually, as a matter of routine, as a routine matter, delicately, carefully, tackle, try out, mounting, increasing, confining, restricting.